You have returned to the SRV channel, where we're broadcasting live streaming classes almost every Sunday, only occasionally with a break when we visit our mainland ashrams, and sometimes when we have a end of a series, we take a Sunday off. As many of you know, and many of you I know are looking back on the host of dozens of YouTube classes and live streaming classes that are there, both on our website and also available on Advaita Academy's website in a raw form. All of these being hit upon. Many hits they're receiving as I see the viewers availing themselves more and more of the Dharma on a deeper level. And not just letting it sit in your craw like peas and corns in a craw of a pigeon, but digesting it all the way down the system and letting it bring nutrients to all levels of your body, all 7 levels of your body, all your bodies, if you want to make a point for that, as we have been in the first half. The second half, you can notice I've changed the chart scenery here, one of them to refer back to a chart we did. We looked at half of last week. We didn't really get to the religious preferences, references of the Eye of Wisdom in these other, maybe 7, if not more, different religions of the world. We want to look at that for sure, which would be a good way of entering into the second half. Now, the top half of the chart we already went through. There were gross senses that see outward, and subtle senses that see inward, and causal senses that see with a single eye. That would be our Jnana Chakshu. And then, of course, senses that are always looking down toward the lower worlds. And if you don't know what the lower worlds are by now, then I don't want to have to go back and repeat the first half of this class, but you saw the 7 systems and all of those first allocated to the first 3 chakras of Kundalini, and how there are even worlds below that that are of demented and deluded kinds of seeing. So there's enlightened seeing, and there's just outward seeing. There's inward seeing too, inward sight, but there's also very demented and deluded kind of seeing, which we see many of the people of the physical world who are engrossed in domination and war and inflicting suffering on others and all of those kinds of inferior pastimes that bring about karmas for people and nations and over lifetimes, and never, as Holy Mother said, never really learning from the mistakes of that. Or in a more positive vein, Vivekananda said, when will man be friend to man? Oh, when will man be friend to man? It's all the races and competitions and climbing up the ladder and everything. And he had, of course, seen enough of it in India, so when he came to the West, he didn't like to see it even exacerbated there, because the English had been in his country too, and pulling that kind of nonsense and bad karmas there. So we see that then the very idea of seeing, and I remember one of my students telling me that this recently, is that now I'm seeing without my eyes. So there's a kind of mental seeing or intellectual seeing that happens that can go on even when your eyes are open or closed, or when you're not even conscious of what your eyes are doing or seeing. And that would bespeak more of this wisdom eye beginning to open. You're seeing everything with the intelligence that's in you. And so it points to something very interior and closing in on the principle of non-duality. If thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. Closing in on the truth, no matter in which religion you might say that. So without going back and repeating all this, which you can see that on last week's class, but let's go on and see how many references I found in just a couple of days looking at the different religious traditions of the world in their scriptures with this idea of a wisdom eye, or Jnana Chakshu. Of course, in this country, the first one we would think about if we were thinkers and it came up, and we were asked the question about this third eye, or maybe we saw a poster of a Hindu god or goddess with that on them, or maybe kids would come up and ask, you see, well, what's that? Eye in the forehead? That's strange. And probably the only reference we could make to it, if we were raised in Christianity in America and Europe, would be this statement, if thine eye be single, thou shalt know the truth, is one of the ways in which they define that statement of Jesus. And so that would be a reference to that very specialized, how to say it, esoteric kind of eye, and what it sees, how it sees inward, or maybe how it sees inward and outward, and beyond. I think of the young Swami Vivekananda named Narendranath before he became a monk, and Sri Ramakrishna used to see the young Naren and say, he goes around with his eyes looking in the distance all the time, like a mother bird hatching her eggs. He wasn't really noticing his appearance. His hair was disheveled, his clothes weren't on, straight, and he didn't have any of that kind of etiquette or vanity to him at all. And his eyes were not even seeing what was before him. So he had this intellectual seeing even as a young teenager that was very deep in him, and the master loved to see that. He knew that was this, that Naren had come onto the earth, into the body, with these centers open. So that's what I think about when I think about this knowing the truth with the single eye open. Now Hinduism, of course, and this is what I chanted at the very beginning of this class, if you want to look it up in the Gita. They who perceive with the eye of wisdom, they truly see. Devoting themselves to wisdom, they are neither born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of dissolution. But the deluded do not see me as I depart, stay, and enjoy. Only they truly see who possess the inner eye of wisdom. So half of that chant I rendered at the beginning of this class today, in the first half, and very beautifully so. But the rest of it is that if you have this inner eye open, then you're not disturbed at the time of birth, nor are you disturbed at the time of death. That is, basically, put it even more succinctly, you're not born when you're born, and you don't die when you die. If you're living in that third center, it's just all an add-on and a takeaway, an add-on and a takeaway, all that change going on, the taking on and giving up of bodies, as Sri Krishna is to explain later in the Gita, is just like children outgrowing sets of clothes and putting on new clothes that fit them. So that's a good analogy for beings who are graduating these centers. They're through with the three worlds, then they're through with transmigration based on desire. Then they arrive at the heart chakra, and that's a new set of clothes. It's a new world. It's a new level of their consciousness, and they may warm up to it or expand to it. That is, consciousness with a capital C doesn't expand, but consciousness, the mind's consciousness does expand, and the Upanishads say we should expand our mind's ability to see Brahman in everything. So they are seeing more and more the reality as they graduate these centers. And remember, you can do that in your sadhana here on earth in the physical body, or you can do it in dream, or you can do it after death, or you can depart the body and have prepared yourself for these levels of consciousness before you do. That is, you probably want to make acquaintance with death himself. He's a god, and Yama, they call him. And so you just meditate upon him for a while, and you settle all matters with him. And you realize, because you're raising the Kundalini, which is the Divine Mother, that, as one song in India sings, oh, death is just giving a very simple significance. It's just giving a little bit of work in her kingdoms, her 7 kingdoms. And that's to take people to different places where they're destined to go. Some people of lower thought, lower thinking, they're going to return to Earth. Maybe, who knows, hopefully not even lower, if they've created a lot of karma or suffering for people. Lower births, as Krishna says in the Gita, but some death will transition them beyond this. Oh, here it is again, actually. I was pointing back to the red line of the last chart, but here you see it is, this time defined, Vishnu Granti, sort of an elastic membrane of subtle awareness that keeps you bouncing back to these 3 lower worlds. But I don't want to get too far ahead of us. Let's take a look at the third reference in the Kundalini system itself. As Kundalini traverses the 6th center, or lotus, called the Ajna Chakra, currents of refined prana rise high. Visions, light, and internal sounds are experienced, and the mind gets so absorbed that it loses normal consciousness. Short of a scriptural reference, this is what Sri Ramakrishna, how he described the piercing of the 6th chakra and beyond to the 7th chakra. He had these experiences himself in this day and time. If you just had to refer to Krishna so many hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, maybe it wouldn't be that convincing to you. But to see a person of your own time, in this case in the 1800s, professing to have experienced the full awakening of Kundalini Shakti through the 6th and even into the 7th center, or lotus as they're putting it here, chakra, then it's very convincing. It has a lot of power to convince. So those are Christianity, Hinduism, and then the Kundalini Yoga system itself. Here's Buddhism's, or Lord Buddha's way of putting it. Shakyamuni, he said, I have the true Dharma Eye hidden in my wisdom eye. I think it's in the Dhammapada. And so a very beautiful way of putting it. So inside of this wisdom eye is all this Dharma teaching. And all he had to do was keep it open and come to earth, take on the incarnation of the Buddha, which is probably just a one-time thing with him, because he's gone and gone forever after that. Leaves behind some teachings and some bodhisattvas and so forth, emanations. But for him being here, I am the awakened one, I am the Buddha, this you have to know about me. Awakened means this great power has risen, or was always there. He just had to come and exemplify it in front of thousands of people. Millions of people, but very few find out about it very quickly, unfortunately. Which is why we need to be introducing teachings like this into our children, but even into the general public, I'm thinking more and more. There's a general dissemination or seeding of wisdom, even with normal people, and then they'll have to work it out. There's, of course, your devotees or disciples or aspirants or seekers who are already very deep, and you probably have to transmit to them, as the chart we looked at the first half said. Early on there's a transmission of samyak jnana has to be done as soon as these people can understand words, these young souls. And you'll be surprised. You say, well, they don't know anything. How are they going to understand this? It's in a different language. It's from a different country. It's foreign. You'll be surprised what the soul knows that you don't know yet. That young soul, because there's not very many coverings over it yet when it's young. But you've developed these conditionings and coverings that you're going to have to get rid of before you can understand this. It's hard enough battle for you, but it's going to be easier for the souls, the younger souls, and that's why they meditate so quickly if you put them into this position. I've had that experience myself with children, and some parents have even gotten a little frightened because their children wouldn't come out of that position very readily. What happened? What did you do to them? Well, I didn't do anything. I just told them to sit that way and concentrate here or anywhere. And so because they're only 4 or 5, 6 years old, so few of those conditionings have come to them yet. And the conditionings that are more important, the samskaras back in their minds from past lifetimes, the good karmas and so forth, are ready to be brought forth and recognized. So That's why you have people as young as 6, 8, 10, 14 in Jesus' case, but 10 in the case of Shankara, and younger in the case of other seers, left home so quickly as soon as they had this wisdom and began going about their father's business, if you want to borrow that from the Bible. And India has seen many, many of those divine incarnations. So that's all an advantage that beings have, like Lord Buddha, who would come and say, well, I have all the Dharma hidden in my wisdom eye. So he knows about the center. Buddhism has a system, shamatha, where it also teaches much like the 7 centers. It has 6 centers, and it's aligned with the 5 elements and what's beyond the 5 elements and the 6 passions. They put them all together in their own system, and then you meditate Buddhist style. It's called the burning pillar. So the idea is that you just get rid of all darkness by turning yourself into fire. And you turn yourself into fire by destroying all the poisons inside of you. See how many poisons there are inside of the chakras? Also next to them, how many nectars there are inside of the chakras. So with the Kundalini system there, I pulled this chart out of there and showed Shiva and Shakti. And I don't know if we'll get to it this week, but next week definitely we'll see side by side what kind of admixtures there are at all levels of existence, and how to navigate, you might say, how to use the nectars and even benefit by the poisons. Like I was just mentioning Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, if you have a wrathful deity or a poison in there, that's on purpose if that's there. And you've probably put it there to scare yourself, to waken up. So it's not like devil's out to get you, hell and brimfire for the rest of your existence eternally. It's like, oh, here's an obstacle that in my path that's, as soon as I break through it, it's going to give me a lot of impetus towards light. It'd be just like this, so you try and push against your own hand. See, so if you push against your own hand, there's lots of pressure there. What if all of a sudden this hand just fell away? See. So that kind of pushing against negativity, darkness, depression, and all those things is creating a power for you to penetrate. And if you could all of a sudden, by some means, grace, spiritual practice, study, meditation, devotion, whatever it might be, whatever yoga you're using, take away that impediment, and you were still putting that pressure on, you'd have all this impetus for growth. So that's how India would look at an obstacle or an impediment. That is, it's called a mala. It's an imperfection that has been placed there on purpose, so that it will give you that force and give you more impotence after you release yourself from it. It's like you put it there, you release yourself from it. That's because you can make great headway in any given lifetime by overcoming that obstacle. It's an interesting way of thinking of the word sin or transgression, the way we might think of it if we were raised in fundamentalist thinking. So a lot to say there about the Shakyamuni Buddha when he says that beautiful saying about this wisdom eye. Taoism, now if we go to that, quote, the eyes are the windows of the soul. Between the two windows is the main door to divinity. Enter there to discover your inner divine nature. So Lao Tzu was the one, probably the most famous of all Taoist teachers, and the most well-known, gave us that beautiful saying about the door to divinity. So you have different words for that. Your wisdom eye, Jnana Chakshu, single eye, door to divinity. What's another one? Gnosticism says, the true gate is also the door to one's divine nature. It is the front door to heaven. It is located neither left nor right, up nor down. It is right in the center, and thus is called the door to divinity, the white sun. So a Gnostic mystic had written that I found, the white sun. So there's another one that I didn't find the actual quote for, but it's called the white dove ascending. I think it's probably a more of a recent Christian, like a New Age or New Age Christianity kind of. The white dove ascending is also another assignment that they've given at one time to the third opening of the third eye. Confucianism, we'll say there, because this is 7 quotes of all things for this half, which is rife with 7 systems. Confucius said, 3 persons are walking together. Who is the master? They all have 2 eyes, but the divine third eye is the master of all of them. So definitely all Eastern. You've got the Chinese, the Hindu, the Indian, you see, and some Christian reference there. Pretty widespread across different religions, because all religions really are Eastern, Middle Eastern or Far Eastern, but of the main religions of the world right now. But basically, you have these running a gamut of teachings that all refer at one time or another to this very important center. And I think you can be an early meditator, and if you sat, you would probably concentrate there until they told you, wait, I want you to concentrate on your heart first. So they really want you to open this up from the 3 lower worlds into the first world and not just jump to the third eye, which can be a little bit disorienting. That's actually one of the poisons here of the third eye, is that people get disoriented by opening it up too quick. I know some books I read in the 60s and 70s about Kundalini Yoga from some of these spiritual materialists that were trying to get famous or rich on such systems. And they were having some very kooky experiences. And I think it was because of concentrating on the third eye. When I looked back into the Upanishads and Gita and so forth, the reference was always to opening the heart chakra first and going by stages. You can see how the 7 stages we looked at are definitely in stages. The attainments and the practices are all in levels of stage. I mean, you're probably going to want to go to Holy Company and get a guru and the scriptures. We saw all that at the first half. So you set this up and qualify yourself for this appearance of the Divine Mother at different levels of your own consciousness. That was a quick read, so that we took half of it last week. I think we can go quickly then to these next 2 charts, which have to do with the nadis themselves. Now, I've shown this chart on several occasions. It had always been one of my favorites of the charts for a long time. And because as hard as it was to create this roadmap with all these different lines I had to do on the computer, it nonetheless came off nicely as they all were coming out of different chakras. So began to flesh out or explain my own take on this inner roadmap or this inner roadways. You've often heard me say, over the last few hours I've started speaking, many people have passed from the body, died, that is, and many people have been born again. So, and people are asking all the time, where do they come from, where do they go? Or maybe they're not asking that question, they're just, that's it, life and death, one life, it's over. Which is back to those people who are not entertaining anything other than one life in one body. But for those who are entertaining it, as we are with the Dharma, then you would have to say that India has been explaining this from time out of mind to try and get to people used to the idea of moving in levels, stages, avastas, worlds, dvipas, bhumis. Go on across the whole chart in 14 different ways trying to exhaust worlds, lokas, nadis, centers, chakras, that are trying to explain to you how the mind's consciousness moves. And it might have been a mixed teaching that came along with some of the Buddhist schools and so forth, that you were to seek enlightenment and renounce all the worlds, because that was also what Hinduism was teaching in its monastic levels a lot, so that you just didn't regard any of the worlds anymore. You just leapt for this high state of enlightenment called nirvikalpa or nirvana or moksha or mukti or kaivalya or sampragyata or satori in Zen. And you just wanted that and that only, because that's what they said was the highest state, and everything else was unreal. So along came Tantra and Yoga to try and help you understand by levels that it would be more completing, more fulfilling, and more beneficial, and make it more possible for you to attain this highest level of consciousness, seventh chakra, not even a level anymore, if you worked your way up through these levels of consciousness using certain practices that were pertaining to the blocks. You see here Brahma Granthi. There are people, what to speak of those lucky ones who are trying to get into heaven or beyond heaven. What about these poor souls down here who are stuck to earth? They're being born over and over again in tamasic and rajasic human forms, and into lower births still, into evil wombs. So these are three mentions of Sri Krishna in the Gita. So you've got people then who are being born into animal wombs, people who are being born into human body and ignorance only. They never know where they came from, where they're going, and they just appear and disappear without ever knowing. That's two kinds of lower births. And then there's evil wombs. They're born into the wombs of evil beings. Like we said before, trying to make God responsible for this in some way is just not going to work. And souls who are attracted to very gross things are attracted to each other, so that they can get more of those gross things. This is a karmic teaching that's very hard for people to hear, because they want everything to be flowers and roses and all nicey-nicey. But it's not going to remain that way in this world. It's going to change back and forth between good, bad, and mixed. And Krishna is teaching that as far as the three kinds of karma, all the kind. 4 types of karma, 3 shades of karma, and so forth. Different 4 dynamics of karma. We've taken those charts before. So I'm saying this all about this lower Granthi. Brahma Granthi is disembodied spirits that can't get back into earth. There's the Patalas that were mentioned in the last chart we looked at. And beings who are pretty much earthbound. There you see plant life, insects, animals, and humans, all coming out of this lower chakra, the root chakra. And so that's all it is to them. You could say it's just physical, that's all it is. I don't think of anything beyond my physical form and my senses and satisfying my desires of hunger, thirst, and procreation and various things. I don't think of anything other than that when I'm here. See? And the result of that could be that I run afoul of karma and make a lot of mistakes, which even cast me into lower births and lower wombs still. So something to look at, if you can get beyond the Brahma Granthi, at the Vishnu Granthi, and these are teachings in Kundalini Yoga Upanishad that not something that I'm, some sort of concept that I've cooked up. It's basically, these are teachings that I'm putting on a chart for you, so you can see all these pathways that are leading, and some of them lead to your ancestors. And there you see what we looked at in the last quote, the last chart rather, Burloka, the earth, Bhuvarloka, with your lower ancestors, and Svarloka with the celestials. So these are the 3 worlds we looked at, which are part of those 7 worlds. And you see all of these avenues leading to them in various ways. and that souls are transmigrating through these three levels, having experiences, just as you might have 3 different experiences in 24 hours. Oh, I'm awake now. Oh, I'm dreaming now. Oh, I went into deep sleep now. Now I'm awake again. See, just like in 24 hours, beings are dreaming lifetimes in 3 ways, in 3 worlds. As we said in the first half, if they're seeking enlightenment and holding on to the body for purposes of that, they can hold the body as a foundation and have these experiences and learn from them and have a chance at penetrating the realm of the ancestors. That is the Pitri Loka. So, Svar Loka, Mahar Loka, Jnana Loka. So this would be, another name for that would be the Pitri Loka, the realm of your ancestors, and the realm of the celestials that they pray to. Because it's not only Christianity that has a heaven with angels in it and archangels and so forth. Hinduism has always been thinking in that terms too, and worshiping their ancestors so that they can pave their way to higher experiences in these 3 worlds. So, explaining it at the level of the 3 worlds more, you can see the 3 chakras there. Svadhisthana, Muladhara, Svanishthara, and Manipura. And this assignment here, Samsara Pragbara, is Lord Kapula's way. So this system has been in effect for this way of thinking all the way since the Samkhya Yoga period, where this was a transmigration going on. I think Samsara Pragbara, and then there's a Kaivalya Pragbara, might be somewhere on this chart. But, there's Kaivalya Pragbara right there. So Kaivalya means freedom, and Samsara means bondage into lifetimes. So you can see these 3 are Samsara Pragbara levels of beings. Even though they may attain heaven, they also come back to earth and risk falling into hells, dark ways of thinking, bad periods of time. So wasn't there plenty of good Jews when Hitler was here? Probably plenty of bad Jews too. So, I mean, it doesn't matter really the race, or it's the quality of the consciousness we're talking about, who have fallen into certain religions, who have fallen into certain bodies, into certain karmic conditions, or have kept themselves free of those things and not identified with the weeds, but have always watered the flowers. So that would have to go back to this path of the moon leading to the path of the sun, where you can penetrate the Vishnu Granthi through real love. If you don't have love for God, this is your realm, the 3 worlds. If you finally fulfill, or in whatever way possible, renounce the worlds of becoming, you have candidacy all of a sudden for reaching Brahman, and that would be because you love God, not the world. You see, oil and water seem to mix. God and the world seem to mix. And you say, yes, oh, they mix, how nice, you see. So you're at these 3 lower centers, and the cylinder falls right there, you see. You can just tape it there, you see, or make a picture of it. But see how it's separating? So as soon as it separates and it becomes oil and water, now it's become those who love God and those who know the world. Na sattva vidyate vidyase sattaha. Those who know the difference between the real and the unreal and take to the real. Sat. So, na asat vidyate bhavanubhava vidyate sattaha. And then, ubayor api drisantos, tu aniyos tattva darshibihi. So that means those who know the difference between the real and the unreal, between sat and asat, then they know the truth about both relativity and reality. So it kind of goes on the trail of that if I'm working my way transmigratory style in the three chakras, and I'm not informing myself about these higher teachings, then I don't know the real. And I'm confused by the unreal. I'm taking the unreal to be the real, you see. There's the real rub. You think the world is real, you think your experiences are real, you think your emotions are real, you think the changes here are real, you think all the illnesses that are coming your way are real, you think that your life and death are real. Only Brahman is real. So they try and explain this to you forever. These are beings who are at the highest chakra. See? I mean, there's the Sahasrara, that's not even a center. But they've opened the inner eye of wisdom, the Ajna Chakra. You can see it's next to assignments like the Avatar, Rudra Granthi. That's a knot that's very subtle to break. So these three great knots, Brahma Granthi, Vishnu Granthi, and Rudra Granthi, are obstacles in your consciousness. And they're different than your individual karmas. They're related to your individual karmas, but they're different in the fact that billions of souls are gathering around all of them. You see, less populated, of course, around the Rudra Granthi, but there are a lot of people who are trying to gain enlightenment, and as we just mentioned earlier. So this is a kind of quick rundown of this chart on nadis, which are lokas, which are worlds. We looked at several different seven systems in the first half about lokas. Then nadis, which are these roadways or pathways inwards that are leading to them. I don't know how to explain it except that you've got hundreds and thousands of nerves and vessels in the physical body carrying things. So just use that as a kind of example of your subtle body then, your dream body, and how many hundreds and thousands of channels are there, but it's carrying prana, it's carrying psychic prana, it's carrying Shakti, which was a quote we took right out of the first half in that chart, you see. These conduct prana, psychic prana, Shakti. So man does not live by bread alone here on earth in these nadis. He lives by prana, he lives by psychic prana, he lives by Shakti, and those are operative in the subtler levels or worlds. And so you should know about them, levels of consciousness, different worlds people go to. Right away it will divest you of that misfiance, that misconception about birth and death being real. As you're an eternal being. If you're still here, you're playing in the fields of the Lord. If you're here, you're not playing very well. If you're here, you're an expert player, like Sri Ramakrishna said. Sometimes chess players, the ones who are looking on, are making the better moves than the one involved, you see. So you become less and less involved with unreal things when you open the third eye of wisdom, which is why 7 different religions are telling you about it, and different seers and great souls, some of whom you've even heard of, who are not from India, like Lao Tzu and Jesus and so forth, are telling you this same thing. So you raise your consciousness, is a way of saying it. There are so many things on this chart, but we've gone through it many times. I wanted to show it to you because it has an assignment of the 7 chakras. You know, there's the 3 below, there's the 1 in the middle, here's the 3 above, because don't forget the Sahasrara at the very top. And how all of these nadis can stay restricted or occasionally can penetrate through. From the ocean of light you can get to the heart chakra. See? From having real love you can get to the heart chakra. When you meditate on the ocean of sorrowless light, Patanjali says, you can get to the heart chakra. And even through your ancestors, you can get to the heart chakra because you've developed piety, love of truth, love for God. All of these things are ways to get through that thick triple line there that I'm using to represent See, because this is finer, this is a little higher, point size, and this is very gross point size. So very difficult then to get out of the worlds of darkness into the worlds of light, and then get beyond heaven into the world, and beyond the ancestors into the worlds of where this is staying open. See? So God, the sleepless eye. So you often say God does not sleep like we do. See, it's got this eye that's always open. And the yogis get that, and they call it the yoga of insomnia. See, because they don't need to sleep anymore. It's actually kind of hard for them to sleep. They just want to be there at the third eye, seeing everything from a witness standpoint, observing the play, and with enough wherewithal to be able to see through in the other direction these barriers so that they can get to the loved ones, the devotees of God, and help them, and also awaken sleeping souls, even awaken suffering souls. Patita Pavana, it's called. Now, in this chart, I just want to read you proof of the nadis, because you don't find this in any other religion so well documented. So let me read you these quotes, because each one of them has to do with nadis, these channels that we should be running our consciousness along. Indram Mitram Varnamagni Mataracho Divyaha Suparna Garutman. Garutman is the carrier of consciousness. So he carries the prana, you see, inward. Make him a friend. It's not just an airline somewhere in the east, Garuda Airlines. It's actually named very well after something that carries consciousness inward. So, Prashna Upanishad, in the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each of those are 100 more, and each of these branch into 72,000 other nadis. In all of these, Shakti power flows. That's Vedanta, right out of the Prashna Upanishad. One of my students was studying that just yesterday and wrote me about it. All the teachings on prana, and Garutman, how the carrying of prana in meditation, even in sleep, if it's conscious, how consciousness can remain ever awake, in an ever awake state, and be interested in its own spiritual evolution, if you want to put it that way. Next quote. Within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness, with its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, in which all the universes exist. And yogis have described seeing this with this eye as they went inside, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, which is why it got called a lotus later on. Because if you open up a lotus, you see that out where the flower comes out of. You see, it's shaped like that, they say. So the lotus is a very important symbolic flower for spiritual things too, not just for aesthetic beauty out here. And two more to read to you, because these are all from the different scriptures that are affirming for you that beings have seen these nerves, nadis, subtle nadis, and that they go inward to different states of awareness. By now you should know in 7 different ways, times 7, how these permeate these worlds and take you there. They're like wisdom nadis. They carry mother, Shakti power. The individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, subdivided hundreds of times. So that's your transmigrating soul. Hopefully it's not going to transmigrate in these worlds anymore, unless it does so consciously. Should a man be reborn? Asked Vivekananda. I certainly hope he will not, he answered, not unless they can do so in full consciousness. Beautiful answer. And full consciousness would be having your third eye open and aware when you were born in the fetus. You saw the whole process. You saw your parents. You saw the world you were going into. You saw the work you had to complete. You saw that you had to leave at 10 years of age to get away from your parents so you could do that work. You saw it all. Not knowing after. Read my article in the recent Nectar Journal about the principle of knowing after. Knowing something after you're born really just proves that you knew it before, because it existed, and you just had to discover it, right? So we know everything after the fact, but it should be a positive thing. It's one of the 6 proofs of truth that we discovered it, didn't it? So what did that mean? That the ignorance that veiled it was not real, because we came to knowledge of it, you see? The beauty of the thing. It wasn't like we created something new or that it was covered forever. It's that we knew after, so we must have known before. So this is one of the 6 ways of philosophy in India in which they, even behind the 8 ball, come to know of what's called pre-consciousness or precognition in Buddhism. I already knew that. I just had to re-know it. But some of these souls come to a level where they knew it all the time. They didn't even forget it when they came into the 3 lower worlds to help us. They kept it and they exited with it. So there's an ideal for you. Last of these is, bathe at the most sacred confluence of holy rivers, found within the precious human body, where the 3 spiritual nerve channels meet. There's one going up the middle. See the arrow? There's one going around. See these 2? Ida and Pingala. So they go around the central channel. And this isn't up to your brain. This is into your mind, into your Atman. We never look up and see God. We look in to see God. God doesn't exist back nor up. In is where we go. So you're going to need some roads to travel along to find him, or her, or it. See? Whether you see it with form or beyond form and formless both, you need some road to travel. You do that tonight in dream. You travel out of your body. You forget these worlds. Maybe you talk with your dad or some disembodied spirit or whatever. See? And so then you come back to the body, and all of a sudden there you are back in the senses in your physical form, and you discount then that experience you had as if it were just a figment of your imagination, or did you shift levels of consciousness and run through subtle nerve endings, like we've said 4 times here from the scriptures of India, to try and convince us that this is what we're doing all the time. If we can just accept it, then we can move along it consciously. But if we deny it or reject it, then it's just a closed book for us, below this line. You never get below the line. I mean, most people, I'm saying, never even get to heaven in their thoughts, because heaven has been so poorly described to us in recent Christianity, and so inadequately described in Judaism. It's only physical that we're involved in here. Everyone's describing the physical worlds, the physical maladies, the physical enjoyments, the physical everything, and nobody ever connects them to store up your fruits in heaven, which is a cryptic saying Jesus meant, which meant, maybe you should have some karma merits going on inside, some dharma drops in the bucket, so that when you get here, you have a chance to penetrate beyond your ancestors and take them with you. You're going to have a good time doing that with some of your ancestors, right? You can go higher, come with me. No, I kind of like heaven, I'm staying here. See? So it's like the same here. I kind of like earth. I'm not going to listen to anything you say about going to another level of my own consciousness. I'm happy here. See? It's like trying to talk a pig out of his body. You see? Just wallowing in slop. You sure you want something better? I can give it to you. I'll give you a bath and I'll feed you better food. I've got some leftover corn on the cob I'll give you. So how are you going to talk people out of lower levels of consciousness? Actually, it's kind of a dichotomy, isn't it? It doesn't make sense, lower level of consciousness. There is no lower level. That's not consciousness you're talking about when you've descended that low in your thinking. You're only really, no, consciousness is if you get to the heart. and love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself, by the way. So think about that the next time you take the last roll of toilet paper in the market, standing in line, and the person behind you doesn't have it. Why don't you just turn and give it to them? Well, you know, in India we've been using their hands. They've been using their left hand for a long time. I can just do that and wash it with some water. Here, take the last roll if you want it so bad. See? Wouldn't that be nice to see something like that happen? But this greed and this fear and everything, and it's all about fear of death and clinging to life. Who said that? The father of yoga, Patanjali, Abhinavesha. There are 5 hells. The lowest possible hell you could fall into is fear of death. It's a good one to think about. There's much more to say about this chart, but I think that has been enough to show you 4 different examples of nadis. Actually, here, let's take the 5th one out of the Setashvatara Upanishad. And we know this here in SRV, both in Sanskrit and in English by heart. I won't have you prove it right now, but it's basically that Ara Eva Ratanabhau chant we go through. There in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, abides the Atman. Ever stationary, but becoming manifold. Meditate on that self as Om. Omityeva Jayatha Atmanam. And Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. Here's all darkness. And some mixed light, you see. So crossing over to the farthest shore is what you're going to want to do. Svastivaha paraya tamasaha parastat. So beyond tamas is darkness. So you can be dark in heaven, you can be dark in the realm of the sages and the munis and cities, as we were saying on that chart. Certainly a lot of darkness here in the world, and even more below the Brahmagranthi, where souls are living in abject darkness. You kind of see it over here. There's the path of the moon. Krishna describes as one of the great paths, one of the 2 great paths at the beginning of time that he made for beings. And then the path of the sun, see. So in this chart with the nadis and the worlds and chakras and all, I put as much as I could from different systems in there to give you a kind of hands-on look at a roadmap, if you will, for spiritual life. And so you can find out what it feels like to open a nadi. Like, say, I didn't know anything about the scriptures 10 years ago. Then I met my teacher. Now I know a lot about the scriptures. Isn't that a nadi you opened? And aren't you going to keep it open? And didn't you get a lot of benefit from it? So whether it happens on the level of physical healing, where you open a nadi, or breathing, you open a nadi, but more importantly, mind. If you can get your mind open to all of this light, then you're just reenacting what rishis long ago have realized and are coming back again and again to remind you of. So that's kind of the purpose of creating something like this, with, of course, Mother Kali at the backdrop of it all. She's the one who's coming up the Sushumna central channel to meet Lord Shiva at the top, or the crown of the head. And she will carry you with her. Talk about carrier of consciousness, or winged carrier of consciousness. She's in charge of all those beings that open pathways for you. Beyond the Lord of Death, Yama, beyond the Lord of Prana, Garuda, beyond Indra, the Lord of the gods, and beyond the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There she is, taking you from passive trouble to perfection's goal, to quote Vivekananda. She who since birth has ever led me on, through paths of trouble to perfection's goal, mother-wise in her own sweet and playful ways. She who has always and ever illumined my understanding. She the mother, she my all, is my resort. Whether my work overflow with full fruition or with none, may she, the primal guide, my refuge be. If the greatest soul that has visited us in this age could write a poem like that to her, then I would advise everyone to start finding out where she is inside of these chakras, get in touch with her and raise her any way you can to make her open up these granthis, these knots, which we will look at next week. A whole host of granthis in the mind, in the life force, in the body, and in the senses. See, just like a dammed river. That damned river. And we will look at those and how to overcome them, probably not only by the second best method of health, bodily health, and breathing, and things like that, that are good starts, but by the grace of the Mother herself and by our own positive thinking, like willing, as I was talking about in the first half. I'm going to see these nadis open up. See, I'm going to actually witness them inside of myself, feel myself flow along them, so that I can have conscious dreams, conscious deep sleep, and live a dharmic life. So here, rather than with even a few minutes remaining, I think I'll end a few minutes early because I don't want to start into these other two charts, which we will take next week, the granthis and the lotuses. The poisons and the nectars will be a very intriguing, edifying class next week we'll go into. And I'm sorry if this was a little thick as far as all the 7 systems and the worlds, but if you go back on it again and in your notes and repeat it, pause it on the live streaming recordings, then you can have a better chance of cognizing what this really means and how these are playing a great reality in the backdrop of illumined souls thinking. This is how they gauge things, how they measure things, as compared to the greater percent of people on this earth are doing so, simply by physical means alone. That'll be very beneficial to us. So, Om Bhadram Karnebihi Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabirya Jatraha Stirai Rangaish Tushtuvamsas Tanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayahu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.